What did Jesus mean when he spoke about hell? He mentioned it about 14 times, but he only ever defined it once. In all the other occurrences, he speaks about hell as something that's not nice, to be avoided. I'm not going to argue about what the Greek word means. What we're going to look at is Mark chapter 9 and have a look at how Jesus defines the word hell. And he does. If you have a look at the unfolding story of Mark 9 and you check out the context, and then you'll see how the word hell functions and figures and fits in the unfolding context. And what I'm going to present with you today is something pretty radical, and it's the definite minority view that hell is not a place of eternal conscious torment, and it's not a place of damnation. It's not a place of instant annihilation. It's a place of cleansing and restoration. So remember, only once does Jesus actually describe what hell is about, and that's in Mark 9. So let's have a look. We'll start, say, from Mark 9, verse 42 down to verse 50, okay? Let's ask some initial questions. When Jesus uses the word hell, are we supposed to understand this symbolically or literally? Well, let's just have a look at the general thrust of the passage and see, is the language overall symbolic or literal? Mark 9:42 says this, "And if anyone causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it would be better for him to be thrown into the sea with a large millstone tied around his neck. If your hand causes you to sin," hand causes you to sin, cut it off. Cut it off? Come on, guys. I don't know any Christian or any Christian movement that has ever said that Jesus was advocating literal cutting off. This is metaphor. This is hyperbole. These are figures of speech. He's saying if you do anything, cut it out. So straight away we know that Jesus is using symbolic language. Otherwise, we need to be advocating the literal cutting off of hands. No one takes it that way. And hell, as we are going to see, is mentioned in this symbolic setting. So straight away we know that hell is symbolic. Symbolic for what? We're going to get to it. So if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off. It's better for you to enter life maimed than with two hands and go into hell. So hell is spoken of in the context of cutting off hands. Is cutting off hands literal? No, it's symbolic. Then why do we literalize hell? We need to be consistent here. The next verse. It says, "Better for you to enter into life maimed than with two hands to go into hell where the fire never goes out." Fire, hell, cutting off hands. If the fire is literal and the never going out is literal, then the cutting off of hands is literal. We have to be consistent here. So we know nobody takes the cutting off of hands literally. Jesus is not speaking literally. The next verse, "And if your foot causes you to sin, cut it off." Who cuts off hands and feet? No one, folks. The thrust of the passage is symbolic. Hence, hell is symbolic. Symbolic for what? Now, it's not a good thing. It's not a good experience. And Jesus says avoid it. No doubt about it. Cut out what you're doing. Don't experience this hell thing. If you end up in this hell thing, what's it about? What's its purpose? Verse 47, "And if your eye causes you to sin, pluck it out." Again, symbolic language, clearly symbolic language. "It is better for you to enter the kingdom with one eye than to have two eyes and be thrown into hell." If the plucking out of eyes is symbolic, the hellfire is symbolic. Symbolic of what? Here we get into it. Verse 48. "You'll be thrown into hell where their worm does not die." Now come on, folks. Is Jesus teaching the doctrine of the immortality of the worm? Worms that do not die, are they immortal? Clearly not. This is symbolic language. Symbolic of what? We're going to get there. He's going to talk about fire that doesn't go out. He's going to talk about worms that don't die. Is there a common denominator to these symbols? Absolutely. Verse 49, he says, "And everyone will be salted with fire, and salt is good." Good? Hellfire is like being salted, and salt is good. Is everyone going to have, Scott got this sprinkler of salt there and put a bit of salt, bit of pepper on there? It's obviously symbolic language. The whole lot is salted with fire, and salt has a good outcome. Hell has a good outcome. That's what Jesus is saying. What does salt, worms, fire have in common? They're all cleansers. They're all cleansers. Worms cleanse the soil, and they'll put worm on gangrene to cleanse the body. Salt was a cleanser in first century, and it still is here in the South Pacific, and I think and in India. It's a cleanser. And did you know that the Greek word for fire is puros? Puros, where we get our English word purify. Hell is about getting cleansed. Regardless of how you apply this, hell is about getting cleansed. Cleansed of stuff that we didn't deal with here. That's what it's about. Salt is good. Everyone will be salted with fire, and salt is good. It's like worms that eats away the gangrene. It's like salt that cleanses. It's like fire that purifies. Hell is about purification, a very intense purification. The NLV says this in verse 49. Everyone will be made cleaner and stronger in hell. The NLV. The GNT says everyone will be purified with salt. Cleaner, stronger, purified, worms cleaning up, salt bleaching stuff, fire purifying. It's not a pleasant experience, but whatever it is, it has a good result. Salt is good.